from Malibu, and of course that's from Merle Funkhauser. And this is Hyperspace, and I'm Solaris BlueRaven. I'm here with my very special guest, Robert Sullivan IV. And Robert, you with me?
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right. Great to have you on with us. And of course, we gave a little extra break there for everybody, and including yourself. So excellent. Okay, so I wanted to go on a little bit further. I know we touched on Blade Runner right after or right before the break. What other sci-fi films have you been able to decode on that level of Blade Runner, insofar as something similar in that fabric?
With Blade Runner?
Yeah, insofar as transhumanism and robotics, artificial intelligence, and things like that.
Well, there's some strange things going on in, like with the Matrix. Let me answer it this way. Some of this stuff is like on its face with transhumanism, with like Darth Vader, or RoboCop, or things like that. Where you have the fusion. I mean, this stuff's kind of like obvious. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We have the mixing of the human with the robotic. In order to make them some sort of like super creature or something, like Darth Vader, RoboCop come to mind. Those are kind of like, but they stand out. They're really not exoteric or esoteric or anything. I mean, I could tell you a couple, you get into, synchronicity, and some of this real sort of like, this is like stuff you just can't make up. I'll go back to the Matrix real quick. And I don't know if this really answers your question. I'll be honest with you, it probably doesn't, but I'm going to tell the story. It does a little bit because it deals with the Terminator. But this is sort of very weird. And I've been asked before on shows, is this stuff a coincidence? Is this stuff, put in intentionally? And I believe it is put in intentionally, but this is just really a case of synchronicity. I mean, this is one you just can't make up. Is you go back to the second Matrix movie where you have the Merovingian, who was on 101 for 101 of the hotel, and he's the keeper of all the. We got into this briefly right before the break. He's the keeper of all the fears and anxieties of man, the vampires, the werewolves, the ghosts, and this comes from George Orwell's 1984, which is Room 101, which is where men get exposed to their anxieties, men and women, to break them down essentially. Where this really starts to be, get into synchronicity and where you really can't make this stuff up is, this Room 101, it comes out of George Orwell's 1984. Well, go back to 1984. Let's go back to that year. And you have this whole thing with transhumanism, with the Matrix. Go back to that year in 1984. What was the transhuman monster that was stalking mankind, destroying it left and right without pity, without remorse? The Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger. What's his model number? 101, Cyber 9 system model number 101. So here we go again with this 101 symbolism with the transhumanism, drawing on George Orwell's, Room 101 from 1984. And of course, here we have Cyber 9 system model 101 coming out in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
Where this really takes a strange turn is, if that's not weird enough for you, is the very next year, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and this is one you just cannot make up, the very next year made a movie called Commando, with a very young Alyssa Milano. And this is the one where he's strong-armed by this British guy into killing this Banana Republic dictator. And he doesn't want to do it. He rebels, and he goes and kills the people holding his daughter. Well, if you remember that movie, do you remember what his name was in that thing? Arnold Schwarzenegger's name was Matrix, of all things. Matrix this, Matrix that. Beware of Matrix. Yeah, Matrix is coming for us. Matrix is going to kill us. And I mean, you just can't make, here we go back to 1984, 95 with this 101 Matrix, and then, here it is, 15 years later, we get the Matrix, with 101 and, this transhumanism, and, mankind has to beware of the Matrix. I mean, that's just one you can't make up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating. I could chalk it up to synchronicity. But that's just one you just can't make up no matter how hard you try.
Right. Yeah. It's more than synchronicity to some degree, isn't it? It's almost like a resonance effect, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's you get into this whole idea we get into this idea in the book, and I'm kind of talking about this more in the second one, of this idea of, can movies be prophetic? predict the future. And of course they can. And of course sometimes it may be a bit of a coincidence. They make so many of these things, bound to get something right. But then you get something like that that's just really hard to wrap your brain around. And you get into this whole idea, at least what I'm exploring and what I'm sort of investigating is, you get into the whole idea of Carl Jung and the collective unconscious and these themes and symbols and arcana just being inherited and being part of all of us. And it's inherited from day one. And it's just passed down to us. But then you also have to ask yourself, well, could this also be predictive in some sort of way? Is the collective unconscious not only inherited, but could this somehow be some sort of predictive mechanism inside mankind? I mean, it's a fascinating study. It's certainly possible. I'm not coming on here saying I figured it out or I'm 100% sure of that, but it's something to consider, and it certainly would explain a lot how movies sometimes can be completely prophetic. Although in certain instances, let's again make no mistake, I think sometimes these movies are made in some instances to announce things to the world. Things that are coming down the pike. And I do believe that to be the case. Right,
kind of like a calibration for the future. What's interesting too, I mean, and I'm sure that you would probably agree, I would suspect, but it's my impression that everything is holographic and that to some degree, we live in a simulation room, in a simulation field of energy where we can create at will through consciousness, and of course, that's intelligent design. So with that comes all sorts of other components on a multidimensional, multiversal level. I mean, when you get into the bigger scenery of things, it's huge. So when we're putting out films or whatever, even music, I'm sure that there's other things involved that entangle on a consciousness level that create more of that, what we call the synchronicity or that movement that tends to expand throughout the network of the mind and throughout the masses.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, again, it's just what, you're kind of describing in just in a different way what Carl Jung and Plato said. Plato called what you're talking about the theory of forms. That there was part of our subconscious mind, whether you want a higher consciousness or subconsciousness, part of us that, was inherent, and that, through the act of creativity, i.e. making a movie or writing a book, this material, this arcana, this occultism turns up irregardless of our design. Jung, years later, Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, called it the collective unconscious. It's the same sort of thing. And it really is a proper theory when applying this, because what it does is it I don't know if it goes so far as to say it validates it, but it provides explanation, at least rational explanation, for how some of this material may be turning up in movies, whether the maker of the film intended it or not. Again, I believe in most instances it is intended, but I can think of some movies where, like, some of the stuff we were just talking about, where it's not intended, like synchronicity, or symbolism, or the collective unconscious is not intended, but there it is because it's part of us and we can't help ourselves.
Right. It's part of the cosmic dance to some degree.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the cosmic dance. Exactly.
It's really interesting. Now, I was going to ask you about Star Wars. Obviously, everybody loves Star Wars, and of course, that has a lot of symbolism.
Yes, it does. The Star Wars movies, I mean, this is one, my God, where do I even want to start? What you have going on with Star Wars, and I'm going to go into part two, the second batch in the movie, because that's worth talking about, because Lucas does something very interesting in that. And I want to talk about this because we've been talking a lot so far, and this is fine, about just some of the symbolisms in movies. What I would also like to point out to your listeners is, and this is something I document in the book and something that I'm documenting more in the book I'm writing right now, Cinema Symbolism 2, is, we've been talking about the symbolisms within movies. Make no mistake, believe it or not, some actors or actresses are actually cast for occult reasons. The actual placement of a certain actor or actress in a movie can be occult in nature, as well as the artwork. At least we forget movie posters, and the associated artwork regarding movie posters. This can be very iconic and can trigger the subconscious mind. I mean, just for, I'll get to Star Wars in a minute, but just think of the E.T. poster, with the little boy's finger being touched by the alien. Of course, this is Michelangelo, the artwork on the Sistine Chapel with God creating Adam. If you want to see that replicated, take a look at the E.T. poster. So, I mean, this is very, again, triggering these deep symbols and themes in our unconscious mind. Going back to Star Wars, the first three Star Wars movies, this is 4, 5, and 6. These come from the world of a man named Joseph Campbell, and this does tie into Jung, who we've been talking about. Joseph Campbell wrote a book. He's a very, if your listeners are familiar with this guy, he's a very famous American mythologist and symbolist. And he wrote a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And what he's talking about in this book, and I'm condensing just because of time consideration, he talks about this thing called the monomyth, or the hero's journey. And the hero that he's talking about is what I like to call, what Jung would call, the solar figure, the Christ Savior figure, the hero. This is the character who's going to save the world in some point. At some point in time, or in some form or fashion. And in Star Wars, this is exactly what you have going. And what Campbell talks about is, he talks about this hero's journey, and that along the way of this hero's journey, certain things happen to him along the way. And you will find these elements and components of this monomyth turning up in Star Wars. You'll find them turning up in Lord of the Rings, and you'll find them turning up in The Matrix. You'll find them turning up in the Harry Potter, and because they're all the same story. It's the story of this hero plucked out of the general populace, who's a nobody, and put on this path to save the universe or the world from some dark evil force, some dark evil lord. And we've got Neo saving mankind from the machines. Luke Skywalker's going to save mankind from the galaxy from the Galactic Empire. Harry Potter's going to save the Wizarding Ward from the evil Lord Voldemort. Frodo Baggins is going to save Middle Earth from Sauron, the dark evil lord. They're the same story. So with Star Wars, we have Luke Skywalker, the son. The name Luke comes from the Latin lux, meaning light. What light walks across the sky? The sun. So we have the solar hero. And of course, in mythology, this is naturally Apollo. Who's Apollo's sister? Diana. So of course we have Luke and Leia, and she wears the white robes of the moon, the sacred feminine. And of course they're going up against the dark evil lord. Well, Apollo, or Luke, in comparative religion, in the Egyptian religion, is Horus. And of course Horus, the sun god of the offspring of Osiris and Isis, does battle with Set. So hence Luke Skywalker does battle with the Sith, the dark evil lord. Set was the Egyptian lord of darkness. So we have this entire Egyptian solar theme going on in Star Wars. And then, not to throw more onto this, we have Joseph Campbell, the monomyth, the hero's journey. We have one of the components that Campbell talked about was being trapped in the belly of the whale, and how the hero and his friends have to fight themselves out of this sort of confined area and battle their way through a series of trials. In Star Wars, this is the trash compactor Death Star scene. Another scene or another component of this monomyth is what Campbell called meeting the hermit. This is a character who turns up in all these movies. This old wise sage who lives by himself, who has all the answers but only doles it out piecemeal. Think Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, Morpheus in Matrix, Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, Dumbledore in Harry Potter. They all look alike. It's the old graybeard. It's the old wizard character. I call it the Hermes Trismegistus archetype. In the book, it's the wizard. And you'll find this going on in Star Wars. A lot of solar, a lot of archetypes. The Joseph Campbell monomyth, I break these components down much more in depth. But real quick, I could again spend the rest of the night just talking about this. But there's something I want to talk about in the second Star Wars movies. And this was Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. George Lucas does something very interesting in this, and this again ties into an idea of what you call, what I call occult casting, which is the actual placement of an actor or an actress in a movie for a certain reason. If you pay attention to the first trilogy, it's the second trilogy, but the first one, the Anakin Skywalker character is actually paralleling Jesus Christ. If you pay attention to this, he's virgin birthed. The mother has no father. There's no father. He's virgin birthed. What is it? He's accepted, but he's rejected by the church elders. He's rejected by the Jedi Council. He wants to use, powers to stop people from dying. He eventually storms a temple and is eventually killed and resurrected in some form or fashion. So you have this whole idea of Anakin Skywalker being this, sort of Christ savior, the chosen one of the Jedi Knights. Of course, it doesn't turn out that way. Think Neo in Matrix, who's the one. Anakin Skywalker is the chosen one. It's the same sort of thing. And we have these very deep parallels with Jesus Christ, the New Testament story going on with Anakin Skywalker. If you think I'm stretching this, the next time you watch Phantom Menace, pay attention to the actress who plays Anakin Skywalker's mother. This is the one with Jake Lloyd. She turns up in part 2, Attack of the Clones, but only for a minute. The mother who plays Anakin Skywalker, this is Jake Lloyd's little boy. The actress who plays her is named Pernilla August. I want to say she's a Swedish actress. But believe it or not, the same year that Phantom Menace came out, and of course she's the virgin mother of Anakin Skywalker. The same year the Phantom Menace came out was 1999. Believe it or not, Pernilla August actually starred in a made-for-TV movie that year called Mary, the Virgin Mother of Jesus, or Mary, the Mother of Jesus, where Pernilla August played the Virgin Mary. So you have this idea of Lucas casting the Virgin Mary in 1999, not only from this made-for-television series, but putting him in Star Wars to subconsciously convey this New Testament story that's unfolding before you with Anakin Skywalker and the virgin birth and things like that. And that's a fascinating study, the actual use of actors and actresses for occult purposes in movies.
Right, and it's no accident. I mean, there are no accidents with this sort of thing. And of course, what about the music industry? I would say it's the same thing, isn't it?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, with something like that, that's no accident. That is absolutely, without question, intentionally placed and intentionally done. The music industry. I mean, I'd have to be given an example, but music in movies and theme songs, again, are very powerful.
Right, like say for the Beatles, for example, or Elvis Presley.
Right. Well, I don't know. I need a question surrounding that.
Okay. Now I was just curious, but it seems to me like these people are more than fated for their destiny. And I know they're talented, yes, but there's something else going on here where maybe it's an inner circle or maybe it's a ritual association where they know that this is the momentum and this is the magnetism they need to put out there to the masses. I was just curious insofar as what you pick up on with that sort of thing, because music is such a powerful, powerful instrument to communicate on all different levels. It's a universal language.
Well, that's funny you mentioned that, because I do delve into this, and I'll tell a story on this because I talk about it in the cinema book. But with the Beatles and stuff like that, I mean, I do break down some of their music covers from like Sgt. Pepper. I talk about like the occult influence with Aleister Crowley's actually on the cover of Sgt. Pepper, and then you have the whole thing with the Beatles covers and the music. Is Paul McCartney really alive or is he dead? And of course, I'm sure I know you've got to be fully aware of this. The whole breakdown of the Abbey Road cover, where John is dressed as white as God, followed by Ringo dressed as black as the priest. Paul is the corpse out of step with the others, barefoot, carrying the cigarette in the wrong hand, with his eyes closed, who's the corpse. And then George is following him as the gravedigger dressed in denim. And of course, this whole thing is Paul McCartney alive or dead? I mean, this is a main theme within the Beatles songs, within their album covers. I believe it is completely intentionally done, but I think it was more for them, more of a publicity thing than anything. I mean, on Sgt. Pepper's, you have Paul McCartney holding a clarinet, which is the only instrument not found in a marching band. On the back of the cover, he's backwards. Inside the cover, he's sitting in the funeral stance, and I mean, it's just ripe. Everything on those covers is Paul McCartney alive. I mean, in the one album, on Magical Mystery Tour, if you open up the middle, Paul McCartney standing there without any shoes on. Of course, the idea of being barefoot as a corpse, and it says on Ringo's drum, it says the Beatles 3 instead of 4. So yeah, I mean, I just believe stuff like that is intentionally done. The Elvis Presley material is fascinating, and this is something I really I tie into Jungian synchronicity, and this is the idea of, is a person given a life to live, irregardless of their irregardless of their action. Because if you look at Elvis Presley, I mean, it seems like he lived a life that was predestined for him. His whole life, he's the king of rock and roll, and he's also the sort of the sun god. Personifying Apollo. And if you look at this, I mean, if you break this down, it's incredible. With this whole symbol, I mean, this is one you just can't make up. Apollo, the sun god, is of course also the patron of music, and you have Elvis Presley being the king of rock and roll, the king of music. Elvis is born under the sign of Capricorn. which is the winter solstice, which is the born-again sun, when the sun starts its march in the northern hemisphere back to glory at the solstice in June. So you have Elvis being born under the sign of Capricorn, which is the sign that the solstice, the winter solstice, when the sun is born. Of course, this is the Christmas celebration. Of course, Elvis Presley dies under the house of Leo in August. The Leo is ruled by the sun. We have Elvis Presley going to worship. You have in Memphis, Egypt. You go to the old world. In Memphis, Egypt, where did that sit? That sat along the banks of the Nile. What was there? The Temple of the Sun, the Temple of Aten. The sun god. You fast forward years later to United States of America. Well, what's America's version of the Nile River, the Mississippi? What city sits on Mississippi? Memphis, Tennessee. Is there a Temple of the Sun there? Yes, there is. Sun Records. Who made music at Sun? Who made music at Sun Records? Elvis Presley.
Wow.
Take a look at Elvis's jumpsuits. It's all the sun. It's the sun on them. The Mayan calendar. If you remember, years later, towards Elvis, when he died, he came into to the 2001 theme. You remember this?
Yeah.
This is Richard Strauss's. This is a piece of classical music by a man named Richard Strauss called "Thus Spake Zarathustra," and the portion that Elvis came into is "Here is the sunrise." So you have this entire solar life of Elvis Presley going on, and he's not even aware of it. And to my knowledge, to be brutally honest with you, I think I'm one of the first people to document this. I talk about it in the book. I know of no other book that talks about this, but the synchronicity with Elvis, and you even have this whole idea of, this whole thing of Jesus being the son. Elvis, did Elvis survive his own death? And you have this whole idea of, after Elvis's death, the sacred relics. The worship, the pilgrim to the Holy Land, which is Graceland. So you have this whole religious solar allegory going on with the life of Elvis Presley. The king, Apollo, the king of music, the king of rock and roll, the Sun King. And it's just an incredible example of Jungian synchronicity. I'll give you another one of these that this happened to is Houdini, who's a Freemason of all things, the master magician. This is one people have. This is one again you can't make up. Houdini was born at turn of the last century, 1900, was born 26 years before the turn of the last century and died 26 years after the turn of the last century in 1926. If you take 26 and 26, add them up, you get 52, which is the number, cards in a deck. Of course, Houdini's the master magician. So, you will find this occasionally in life where people, are just living these lives that seems to be predestined for them. Houdini is one, and the solar allegory, I call it the solar life of Elvis Presley. It's just incredible.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating to hear you talk about this because it's more than synchronicity. It's more than fate, I would say, on some level. There's something going on. It's almost like a divine ascension blueprint was created before they entered onto the planet, and then there it is, and they just go in there and intercept it, and everything starts to roll. And Elvis Presley too. When I look at his features, he looks like a Greek god.
Yeah, you have, the whole thing with being, the worship of the sun god, being the Apollo figure being put in the movies, the adoration by the women. Absolutely. Then even, you have this whole idea, even with the Christ parody, or parallel, I should say, it's a better word, where where Jesus died and resurrected and went into heaven, but was seen again. You have this whole idea of Elvis faking his own death, and being seen again, and then you have this whole thing with Jesus, the pilgrimage to the Holy Land, the accumulation of the relics, the veneration of the relics, the pilgrimage, during, when Graceland's filled up on the day that Elvis died, the holy site, the visiting of the tomb, the visiting of the grave site. It really does parallel, a solar religion, for lack of a better word. And so does his life, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
When I was writing the cinema book, and I started noticing this. It was just one of these things. I was like, oh, come on. And it was just one, oh, come on after another. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was just incredible. And I was just so happy that I got it in the book because, music is important. And, it was just one of those things. There was no way in hell I was going to leave that out.
No, I'm so glad you put it in there. And what I'd like to ask you is, are you considering doing another book strictly on symbolism with celebrities?
No, but I'm hinting on this again in Cinema Symbolism 2, not necessarily, with celebrities, but Cinema Symbolism 2, we're going to get into a lot of this again. What's important though is I'm going to break down movies that weren't in Cinema Symbolism 1. There's a couple movies that I'm revisiting just because I missed a couple things, but it's very minor. But no, Cinema Symbolism 2 is going to be a whole new slab of movies, and it's coming along well, and I'm real happy with the way it's turning out.
Right. So can you give us a tease, anything? A precursor?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Definitely give a tease.
Okay.
Cinema Symbolism 2, we are going to talk about some of the movies of Alan Moore, the Gnostic occult comic writer. We are going to From Hell, which is a movie starring Johnny Depp and Heather Graham. That's a movie I break down that's very alchemical, and that deals also with the theme of what's called chaos magic. We're going to do some Freemasonry in film. I'm re-breaking down The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp. That was a movie that I took on in Royal Arch of Enoch. I have subsequently watched that, and I'm doing that movie all over again with much more detail. I'm going to do some Freemasonry on the small screen. Sleepy Hollow, the television show on Fox, has some very hidden Freemasonic themes. Some are overt, some are much more overt. Going back to Alan Moore, the Watchmen movie, which is a conspiracy smorgasbord, some very interesting symbolism going on in that, as well as A V for Vendetta with Natalie Portman. Again, some very Gnostic themes of awakening to consciousnness, and some very interesting themes going on in that. Probably right now, let me think some of the other chapters. I'm doing the Martin Scorsese movie Gangs of New York. Some very, very concealed Roman Catholic cinema, themes and symbols going on. That's not only a battle of New York, but it's really a battle for the delivery of New York from the old to the new. Gangs of New York that starred Leonardo DiCaprio and Cameron Diaz and Daniel Day-Lewis. Probably my favorite chapter so far. We're going to do the Harry Potter monomyth. The Harry Potter material was supposed to be in Cinema Symbolism. The first book, it was too much. I couldn't do it anymore. So I'm doing the Harry Potter, all 8 movies in Cinema Symbolism 2. I'm also going to delve into the Narnia material with C.S. Lewis. I did the Lord of the Rings material in Cinema Symbolism. C.S. Lewis was a good buddy of J.R.R. Tolkien, and I'm going to be doing the Narnia tales in Cinema Symbolism 2. Probably so far, I would say my favorite chapter that I've written, it's done. I've got to edit it, of course. Is the I forget the name of the chapter, but it's something to the effect of the mystical archetypes of the Old West.
Nice.
And we will be doing the Magnificent Seven, the movie with Yul Brynner, some very esoteric archetypes in that, and probably my favorite part is the veiled religious symbolism of the spaghetti westerns of Sergio Leone. Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. Those things are ripe with all sorts of veiled religious and Catholic symbolisms. That's probably one of my favorite chapters right now is the chapter on the old westerns. So there's a teaser for you
Nice.
for Cinema Symbolism 2, and that book, I'm writing it right now, and hopefully early fall next year is what I'm shooting for.
Excellent. Oh, I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to be awesome. What about the movie Constantine? Did you look at that one at all?
Yeah, Constantine is an Alan Moore. I to be honest with you, I thought about doing it in this book. I didn't do it. My attitude was I didn't want to go. I did the 3 Alan Moore movies. Another one, it didn't. It was going to drag it out too long. I'm contemplating. It's funny you mentioned Constantine to me. It's actually very funny because I'm actually planning on doing a 3rd cinema book after this, probably make it like a trio of movies, a trilogy. That's the word I'm looking for.
Nice.
With the movies, and Constantine is one that I was probably going to do in the 3rd book. the one with Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, I've seen it once, but it's been a while since I've looked at it. So I wouldn't want to field any questions. But it being an Alan Moore movie, and I know it has Lucifer and all kind of fallen angels, probably dealing with some very deep Enochian themes in that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'd be a good one to address. There's no doubt about that one. I don't know if you remember this old Western called McKenna's Gold. Do you remember that one? I can't remember who produced it.
I don't. The name rings a bell.
Okay.
I've seen it, but it's been years. I want to say that starred. That
Gregory
was the
Peck.
reason why. Huh?
Wasn't it Gregory Peck in that film?
I think Gregory Peck. I remember that was the movie that Julie Newmar, who played Catwoman on the Batman TV show. When they made the Batman movie, she was making McKenna's Gold at the time, and that's how they got Lee Merriweather to play Catwoman in the Batman movie with Adam West. But to be honest with you, it's been so long since I've seen it. I wouldn't want to offer any commentary,
Well, that's okay.
On its symbolism because I haven't seen it in so long.
Right? Yeah.
I'm not saying there's. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say there's some really good old movies out there. And my take is, for you to, I know when you have time because you're so busy, but all these old movies that are out there, I wonder what you'd be seeing insofar as symbolism goes versus the ones that are recent.
Yeah, no. No, it's a fair question. I mean, I take on some of the classics in Hollywood. I did this in cinema symbolism. At least we forget Wizard of Oz, which we've talked about. But I get into in the horror. In it's chapter 7. I did a de facto. What happened with cinema symbolism? This is the first book. This is the book that's out now. The first 2 chapters are horror movies, but specific horror movies. The first chapter is The Exorcist, and the second chapter is the Omen movies, the Omen trilogy. But I wanted to do a kind of like a catch-all chapter on horror films. And I'm revisiting some horror films in cinema symbolism too. But chapter 7 was I took on, sort of the Dracula movies, going all the way back to Bela Lugosi and the Frankenstein movie with Boris Karloff, with again, the monster being a Kabbalistic golem. And then I took on the Wolfman movies. Mm-hmm. The werewolf movies. Pay attention to those. It's a long story. I won't have time for it.
Oh,
but you always find with the Wolfman, you always find with the werewolf, a witch's coven or a group of gypsies not too far behind with the Wolfman.
Right.
There's a reason for that as well.
For a
that
curse
has to do with
or what?
What's that?
Are you talking about cursing, or can you elaborate a little bit, or no?
You always find the Wolfman. There is always this nexus between the Wolfman and the lycanthrope, and usually, not all the time, but usually, and some witch or group of gypsies or witch's coven of some kind. It has to do with the full moon, is why.
Okay.
But it's a fascinating study as well. So when I was doing, but the point I was making was I delve into some of these older movies in the cinema, in cinema symbolism. I mean, even the James Bond material. I mean, that stuff's dated now. That's from the 60s. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, the books. Cinema symbolism, which is out, and cinema symbolism too, which I'm writing. I mean, I just don't limit myself to modern movies. I definitely go back in time.
That's great. I just love the work you're doing, Robert. It's such a blessing to have you on tonight because you do so much for so many people on so many different scales. You're going into all these different levels of symbolism with these films, and it's fascinating. I hope people pick up all of your books and read these because they're incredible. The way you break things down, I've never seen anybody be able to do this the way you can, and I don't know, perhaps it's your Masonic background, but literally you're able to decode so many things.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Solaris. And again, thank you for having me on tonight. I think the show's, I still know we still have some time left. But I think the show was great tonight. And, I'd love to come back on, again, maybe in the near future. And, we could do this again. And certainly when the next series of books comes out, we'll definitely do it. But no, I think for me, I think you asked me, if I hear a question, and I think you're asking me, like, how is it I'm able to do this better than anyone else? I mean, I don't want to sound my own trumpet or toot my own whistle or pat myself on the back. The only thing I can really say is, and I'm not lying, I'm not stretching this, is, really, when I think my Masonic background has something to do with it, but for me, it was really, literally just doing 20 years of research into, these ancient mysteries, astrology, Jungian archetypes, mysteries, symbolism, and this was done pre-internet. This was me sitting down reading a book, not watching a 10-minute YouTube video or anything. And I really, was very cautious about what I put in. I wanted to say new stuff, but I wanted to build this foundation on, on material that was, well accepted in the world of academia. I relied, I tried to rely on scholars and people, that were pretty well accepted in the world of symbolism, within the world of Freemasonry, within the world of the occult, within the world of astrology, all that stuff. And I really felt as though, with the Royal Arch of Enoch book, was really a product of 20 years of research and writing. And, the best way for me to say it, and I've said it before, I think I've said it before on your shows, and I know I've said it on other shows, is I really, when it came to the movies, I really took this 20 years of research, and I turned it on Hollywood. And again, what I want the listeners to your show to understand is, this is something that, when I do this isn't sensationalism. This isn't, there's an eye in a triangle, there's Illuminati mind control. I shy away from that. I try to look for mythology, archetypes, numbers, veiled meanings. And again, what is so critical to this study, especially with the movies, is the context. Before really a symbolic breakdown can be decoded, is you have to look at the movie in and of itself. Am I dealing with an alchemical theme? Am I dealing with a hero's journey? Am I dealing with archetypes? If so, are they astrological, tarot card? Am I dealing with themes of Gnosticism, ancient religion? This is, am I dealing with Freemasonry? Am I dealing with a secret society or Masonic symbolism? And this is all critical to this. And believe you me, it's watching these movies more than once is part of it. I sit there and literally, I throw the movie in the Blu-ray machine or my PS3, and I sit there with a notepad. I make notes. I pause the movie. I cannot tell you how many times something later in the movie will happen that is symbolically referenced, or there may be a clue at the beginning. I'm constantly jumping around, pausing, making notes. I can't tell you how many times I'll be writing this material down. I'll be putting it in print form. I'll be sitting at the typewriter, or at my computer, writing this out, and it'll be like, wait a minute. Something will jump into my head when I was watching this movie. It's like, wait a minute, did I see that, in that movie? And then I got to go back and throw the movie on, find the scene, watch it, and I'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe I missed that, or there it was, and I missed it, or sometimes I'll get lucky and I can just find the YouTube video of it real quick. But it's just a deep study, and I just really try to apply myself with it. And I live by, like I said at the beginning of the show, I live by the mantra of when in doubt, throw it out. I only write about stuff with this movies that I'm 100% convinced Solaris that it's going in upon. I just don't pull rabbits out of hats or anything like that.
Right, and I can tell your works are a masterpiece, by the way. You can tell you've cracked the code on so many of these, and I applaud you for it, and I'm sure many of your readers do as well. I know you have a really large following, so once again, it's been an honor to have you on, and yes, I will have you back. There's no doubt about it. We have about, 10 minutes plus or minus, but insofar as numbers go, I just want to get back into the numbers a little bit here. Mm-hmm. What other numbers have stood out in some of the films that you've recently viewed? Anything that really, really stands out? I know we touched base with some other things in the past, but anything recently? Because I haven't noticed too many numbers with the recent films that are out.
Well, the one that I talk about in the book that's really uncanny, and if I've talked, you can cut me off if I've already talked about this on your show or a past show. It's not from a modern movie. It's from a modern movie, recent movie. It's not like in the last 5 years. But the one number that they really drill into your head, and it's a whole solar allegory again. It's a solar reference, and this ties into the Egyptian Osirian cycle, because what this movie is just a retelling of that. Is the Back to the Future movie, with the whole play on the clock number, the time on the clock tower, from the first Back to the Future movie. The Back to the Future trilogy is one of those movies where it is really overwrought with symbolism and occult themes and Egyptian themes and solar themes. And it is probably one of the trilogies of movies that you would least likely think you would find something, but it's one of the most overloaded. And it was probably, the Wizard of Oz aside, it was probably one of my favorite chapters to write in cinema symbolism, just because of all the hidden themes going on inside those movies. But just you get into numbers. we are taught, it's a whole idea. We don't have time for this, but it's the whole idea of Marty McFly being the solar hero, being part of the solar family. You have the whole idea of Lorraine Baines being the Isis figure, the Virgin Mother. You have George McFly, the father, as Osiris, who gets killed and resurrected in part 2. And then you have Marty as sort of the heroic sun god Horus, who defeats Biff Tannen. If you pay attention to this, in Egyptian lore, the Dark Lord is known as Set. To the Greeks, this god Set is known as Typhon. Hence, you have the name Tannen. They're all but phonetically the same. The McFly family lives at Lion Estate, which is Leo the Lion. Again, a solar reference. If you think I'm stretching this, the dead giveaway to this is the whole 88 mile an hour thing, and the clock striking the clock tower. The 88 miles symbolizes a couple things. One is if you take the number 8 and turn it sideways, it's actually the symbol that becomes the symbol for infinity and the breaking of space time. So that's one reason why they use 88. If you think I'm making this up, take a look at the movie Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. In order to activate the time machine telephone, they have to dial in the year and then hit the infinity number, which is at the bottom. They won't be the pound sign. It's the number 8 turned sideways that activates the telephone booth to allow it to breach space-time. So this is part of the reason why the car, the DeLorean, has to reach 88 miles an hour. You have Marty as the sun god Horus, and again, this is the comparatively the sun god Apollo, who if you're familiar with mythology, Apollo rides around in the sun chariot. This is of the Jewish Merkaba, is the sun chariot, and this is again why the DeLorean spits flames and fire. It's symbolizing a solar vehicle. The sun chariot can't breach space-time until 88 miles an hour. It is drilled into your head when you watch that movie that the lightning is going to strike the clock tower at 10:04. It must be told to you 100 times in that movie. 10:04, 10:04, 10:04. The time of date 10:04 is a very esoteric reference to the date, October 4th. 10 being October, 4 being the 4th date. On the solar calendar, on the Gregorian solar calendar, October 4th is the 277th day, which means there are 88 days left to the sun year. This is why the DeLorean has to hit 88 miles an hour. You're investing it with solar energy to break, the space-time continuum. You have this entire solar allegory going on in Back to the Future. You will find it in part 2. You will find it in part 3. That trilogy is just overloaded with esoterica. Again, it was probably one of my favorite ones to watch. But that's a movie that has a lot of number symbolisms in it. Is Back to the Future.
Mm-hmm. And I love the way you broke that down, by the way. And the 88 days left from the sun year. Wow, I didn't think about all that. That's fascinating. That blows me away.
It just goes to show you, a lot of times the lengths that these guys will go to veil this material in movies. And believe me, if you're watching a movie or a television show, sometimes it's an inside joke. If you watch the X-Files, I want to say the original X-Files show, these guys do this. If you ever watch the X-Files show, you pay attention to the digital clock around, whenever Mulder and or Scully are trying to fall asleep or waking up, it's usually 11:13. And I believe that was an esoteric reference. The guy who invented the X-Files was a guy named Chris Carter, and his wife was born on November 13th. So he always made the time 11:13. So these guys love to play around with this stuff. And again, Back to the Future is just overwrought with all kind of occult goodies in it.
That's fascinating. Wow. And I always like Back to the Future. That was one of my favorite ones also. It's pretty good. And we're going to get ready to wrap this up pretty soon, but we still have a little bit of time here. But once again, I want to thank you so much for joining us, Robert. This has been such an incredible interview. Always an incredible interview to have you on. And I really appreciate you coming on board and sharing your information and your wisdom with us. And also, let's give everybody a rundown how to get in touch with you, how to access your books and purchase all your books.
Well, again, thank you for Solaris for having me on Hyperspace. I thought it was a tremendous show. I look forward to coming back on, just as a touch base show, and certainly when the new books come out. If you're interested in what I'm saying and you want to find me, the best, and you're interested in my books, just go to my website. My full name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is just that. It's Robert. It's www. It's all lowercase, all connected. Robert W. Sullivan, and I'm the fourth, so it's the letter I and the letter V. .com, Robert W. Sullivan IV.com, all connected, all lowercase. From there are links to purchase the books. You can buy the paperback editions of Cinema, Symbolism, and Royal Arch. That's going to cost you a little more. The Kindles are there on Amazon. You can get this material from my publisher. There's links there. It's on Amazon Kindle. It's on Barnes & Noble Nook. The Kindle ebooks are a lot less cheaper than the paperbacks. Again, we talked about this earlier. They're $9.99. It's on the Apple iBookstore. And again, from my website, you can find links to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Robert W. Sullivan IV. It's the same thing. You can watch videos I produced. You can go listen to other podcasts I've done, such as this one tonight. I've actually been on some television shows. You can go watch those. There are links to my social media, Facebook fan pages. You can follow me on Twitter, Google+. There's information about me there, about the author, contact. Again, how to follow me online socially, Facebook fan pages, Twitter feed, YouTube channel, chock full of videos, podcasts, television shows. And again, RobertWSullivanIV.com, links there to buy the paperbacks and the ebooks of both Cinema, Symbolism and Royal Arch of Enoch.
Awesome. Incredible work. And of course, I do want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I hope you appreciated the information. And please stay tuned for Dr. J Radio Live coming up next here on the Dark Matter Digital Network, of course. And so I want to ask you about Sherlock Holmes in the last few minutes we have. What's your impression of Sherlock Holmes?
Sherlock Holmes is sort of an archetypal figure. He's sort of like the Hermes Trismegistus guy. He has all the wisdom. Sherlock Holmes is an invention of Arthur Conan Doyle, who's very heavily into spiritualism, and he was also a Freemason. With Holmes, some of the movies that have been made, it's been a while since I've seen them. I will tell you, with Sherlock Holmes, I'd have to go back and watch some of the TV shows, with Jeremy Brett or The Hound of the Baskervilles, to see if there's any esoterica. But I can tell you that Holmes is drawn upon. The one movie you mentioned, Sherlock Holmes, just real quick to wrap this up. In the third Omen movie, the movie, this is the final Omen movie. They lure the Antichrist. They try to kill him on Dartmoor, but the Antichrist triumphs against the priests who are trying to stab him with the knives. Dartmoor is the setting of the Hound of the Baskervilles, and of course, Damien Thorne is the Antichrist, so he of course dominates, of course, on Dartmoor. This is a reference to Holmes, and if you read or Hound of the Baskervilles, evil is exhausted on the moors. Be careful, the moors of Dartmoor. Don't go out into the moors. Evil lives there. So of course, the monks try to kill Damien Thorne on the moors of Dartmoor, but of course fail because he's the Antichrist. So that the Omen 3 actually draws upon the Sherlock Holmes Hound of the Baskerville stories, just to wrap up with.
Oh, nice. That's really incredible. Well, there's always that polarization between good and evil. It seems to me like we have the positive and the negative, always at keeping each other at bay, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. This is Manichaean. This ties into Gnosticism, Manichaean cosmology, Zoroastrianism. It predates Christianity, the battle of light versus darkness. You will find this in Star Wars, solar light versus darkness. You'll find this in The Matrix, light versus darkness, good versus evil. The Frodo Baggins, the Lord of the Rings, the Harry Potter, the solar savior, the sun god, the hero who's going to save the world.
We're right out of time right here.
Yep.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Keith. Have a great week, everybody.